I still remember that night, clear as the sparks rising from the fire into the cool, pine-scented air. We'd hiked all day, packs heavy and feet sore, and when camp was finally set, we were all hungry enough to eat just about anything. My buddy Rick volunteered to handle dinner. He was a good man, eager, but not exactly skilled when it came to camp cooking. While the rest of us were gathering firewood and setting up our tents, he was hunched over the little pot on the grate, humming to himself. From the way he shook that salt canister, you'd have thought he was casting a spell. By the time we sat down with tin plates in hand, the stew looked decent, steam curling up, bits of potato and carrots glistening in the glow. But the first bite, oh mercy, it was like drinking seawater straight from the ocean. No one wanted to hurt his feelings, so we kept chewing, faces red, eyes watering. Someone coughed so hard I thought he'd topple over. Rick, meanwhile, was smiling ear to ear, proud as a chef. To make it worse, dessert was supposed to be marshmallows over the fire. Easy, right? But somehow, Rick managed to stick his too close, flames licking up until they were black as charcoal. He waved them around like torches, bits of ash crumbling off into the dirt, swearing that burnt sugar was the true flavour. By then, we were all laughing so hard our sides hurt, tears streaming down from both the salt and the smoke. Funny thing is, that miserable meal still lives sharper in my memory than any perfect dinner we ever had out in the woods. We sat there, joking about sailors who'd get less salt in their rations, holding up burnt marshmallows like victory flags. The stars were bright that night, wheeling silently overhead, and the air was cool enough to remind us why we came out there in the first place. Even with our tongues shriveled and teeth crunching on blackened sugar, it was a fine evening. The stew incident was only the start of that night's comedy. You see, once we'd choked down what we could, trying not to let Rick see us sneakily scraping salty chunks into the fire, someone suggested a marshmallow contest. The idea was simple: who could roast the perfect golden brown marshmallow without burning it? Everyone grabbed a stick, skewered their puff of sugar and leaned in close to the flames. The fire was crackling high, throwing shadows against the trees, and sparks drifted up into the night like fireflies. Now, roasting marshmallows is one of those tasks that looks easy until you try it in earnest. Hold it too far and you're waiting forever. Hold it too close and it bursts into flames like a torch. Poor Jenny, the youngest of our crew, had her first one ignite instantly and she panicked, waving it around like a sparkler on the 4th of July. We were ducking and laughing, trying not to get sprayed with molten sugar. She finally shook it free and that blazing marshmallow hit the dirt with a hiss, leaving behind a scorched little crater. Not to be outdone, Tom, who always liked to brag about his outdoor cooking finesse, declared he would show us all the proper technique. He positioned his marshmallow carefully, turning it with exaggerated precision, giving a running commentary like some kind of gourmet chef. For a few moments, it did look perfect, edges golden, skin just starting to blister. Then he leaned in too close, distracted by his own storytelling, and his marshmallow slipped right off the stick into the coals. We howled with laughter while he tried, in vain, to scoop it out with another stick, but all that came back was a sticky black smear. Rick, determined to redeem himself after the salty stew, announced he had the magic touch. He held his marshmallow steady, rotating it carefully. For a moment, it seemed he might actually pull it off. But fate wasn't on his side that night. With one careless flick, the thing caught fire and turned jet black in seconds. Rick just shrugged, popped it in his mouth with a grin and said, "See? Perfect." The look on his face as he tried to chew that charred lump nearly sent us rolling into the dirt with laughter. The truth is, none of us managed a perfect roast that evening. By the time we gave up, we were sticky with sugar, smudged with ash, and laughing harder than we had in months. The firelight flickered on our grinning faces, and even though our bellies weren't exactly satisfied, our spirits sure were. Sometimes it isn't the food that fills you, it's the company, the laughter, and the ridiculousness of it all. By the time the laughter faded and the last marshmallow had either burned, fallen, or been devoured half raw, the fire settled into a bed of glowing coals. We leaned back on our packs, faces warmed by the heat, listening to the forest wrap around us. The night was still, save for the crackle of embers and the occasional hoot of an owl somewhere up the ridge. That's when the mood shifted. It started with a rustling in the brush behind us, soft at first, like something testing its weight on fallen leaves. We all froze, our heads turning toward the sound. Now, anyone who's camped knows there are plenty of little critters nosing around at night, but when you've already got bellies full of salt and nerves buzzing from laughter, your mind plays tricks. Jenny whispered, "What if it's a bear? Maybe it smelled Rick's stew." That got us chuckling again, but it was nervous laughter. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a sharp snap of a branch. Tom, who had been so full of bravado over marshmallows, went quiet as a stone. Rick grabbed the nearest stick, charred black from its marshmallow duty, and held it like a sword. We sat there, staring into the dark, the fire suddenly feeling small and feeble compared to the shadows beyond. Then came the heavy thump of something landing. Maybe a rock, maybe a paw, we couldn't tell. Jenny gasped. My heart was hammering in my chest as I tried to recall the rules about food storage. Had we packed everything away? Or had Rick's oversalted stew pot been left sitting out like a neon sign to any curious animal? The next sound was enough to make us all jump. A long, low grunt from the brush. Not a snort, not a chirp. Something deep, resonant, alive. Tom scrambled for his lantern, fumbling with the flint, while Rick muttered, "I knew I should have gone easier on the salt." My hands were gripping my knees tight, eyes fixed on the darkness just beyond the glow of the fire. The air felt thicker, charged, like we were holding our breath along with the forest itself. Whatever was out there was close. We couldn't see it, but we knew it was watching us. And in that moment, the night shifted from silly to serious. The fire not just warmth, but a fragile shield against the unknown. The brush rustled again, louder this time, and we all leaned forward, firelight flickering across wide eyes. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then, out of the shadows, came two glowing eyes, low to the ground, catching the firelight like twin embers. Jenny clutched my arm, whispering a shaky, "Bear!" And for a heartbeat, I almost believed her. But the shape that emerged wasn't hulking or massive. It was smaller, leaner, and as it stepped fully into the glow, we saw the pointed face of a raccoon. The relief hit us all at once, but before we could laugh or relax, the little bandit strutted right toward the stew pot, bold as anything. Rick jumped to his feet, waving his burnt marshmallow stick like a saber. "Not tonight, buddy. That stew's already ruined." The raccoon didn't flinch. In fact, I swear the creature looked amused, its black ringed eyes glinting mischievously. It pawed at the pot, clanking it against the grate, and for a moment it looked like he might actually drag the whole thing into the woods. Tom finally found his voice and shouted, clapping his hands. Jenny tossed a pine cone in its direction. None of it fazed the little thief. Then, with a sudden burst of boldness, or maybe foolishness, Rick lunged forward and gave the pot a swift kick. The clang rang out through the clearing, echoing up into the trees. The raccoon hissed, darted backward, and disappeared into the brush with a rustle and a final indignant grunt. We all burst out laughing, the tension finally breaking like a snapped rope. Jenny, still clutching her stick, muttered, "All that fear for a raccoon." Tom chuckled and said, "Honestly, after that stew, I say we should have let him have it. Might have taught him a lesson." Rick sat back down, sheepish but grinning. "That raccoon's the only one who would have appreciated my cooking." We sat there for a long while after, replaying the scene, teasing Rick and letting the night settle back around us. The fire burned lower, the stars stretched brighter across the sky, and the forest returned to its quiet rhythm. But every so often, we'd hear a distant rustle in the leaves, and someone would whisper, "He's back." And the whole circle would chuckle again. It wasn't a bear, thank heavens, but for that one tense stretch of minutes, it reminded us how alive the night is out there, how even the smallest of creatures can stir up our deepest fears and just as quickly leave us laughing under the stars. By the time the fire burned down to glowing coals, we were tired from the laughter, the scares, and the long day behind it all. One by one, we crawled into our tents, the smell of smoke clinging to our clothes, the taste of salt and charred sugar still stubborn on our tongues. I lay on my back, listening to the soft crackle of the last embers and the forest breathing around us. Every so often, a twig would snap or a breeze would stir the branches, and I'd picture that raccoon sitting out there just beyond the tree line, waiting for us to drift off so he could try again. As the night deepened, I thought about how quickly our moods had swung, how a salty stew had us in stitches, how glowing eyes in the brush had us frozen in fear, and how that same moment turned back to laughter once we saw the truth. Out there, stripped of the comforts and distractions of home, those swings felt sharper. A bad meal was worse, but a good laugh was better. A rustle in the dark was scarier, but the relief afterward was sweeter. Every small thing mattered more, and because of that, each moment burned itself into memory like a brand. The lesson wasn't about cooking, or even about raccoons, really. It was about leaning into the imperfection of it all, the burnt marshmallows, the oversalted stew, the scares that turn out harmless. Those are the things that stick with you. Nobody remembers the night when everything went perfectly, but we all still talk about that stew, about Jenny's flying fireball, about Rick squaring off against a raccoon with a blackened stick in his hand like some knight of the forest. I smiled to myself, pulling my sleeping bag tighter as the forest settled quiet around us. Tomorrow would bring its own adventures, maybe more mishaps, maybe more laughter, but that night was a reminder that sometimes the best stories come from the moments you'd least want to repeat. Out there, under the stars, with the smoke in your nose and the echoes of laughter still hanging in the trees, you realise it isn't about the food at all. It's about the company, the stories, and how even a ruined meal can make a memory worth carrying for the rest of your days. And with that thought, I let the sounds of the woods lull me to sleep, the image of a salty stew and a singed marshmallow drifting with me into dreams.